Австралийн Welcome. Сайн байцгаана уу хүн үзэгчтэй. Өнөөдөр ороо манай дефакто нэвтрүүлгийн зочноор хойд Баварийн Хунтайж Луйтпольд оролцож байна.
Баварийн Хунтайж Калтенберг шар айрагны компани гүйцэтгэх захирал Luitpold. Хунтайж Луйтпольд нь Баварийн Лудвиг хунтайжийн ганц хүү бөгөөд 1951 онд Баварийн Лиутстэттэнд төржээ. Тэрээр Калтенберг шар айрагны үйлдвэрийн гүйцэтгэх захирал ба жил бүр Калтенберг дэх Рыцарийн тэмцээнийг зохион байгуулдаг. Эхнэр 5 хүүхэдтэй.
Good evening, sir.
Hello.
Welcome to our show. Thank you for visiting Mongolia and our show. So please tell us what brought you to Mongolia.
Well, I was coming here this time to start the introduction of a beer. Rather strange maybe, but our family had many centuries of brewing, and we are cooperating here with the Apu brewery, and we will do an authentic Bavarian Weiss beer here in Mongolia. And so we did a couple of months hard work to achieve with a good result, and we're now launching the product. So I will follow that.
And your family owns very well-known very well-known brewery, beer, Kалтенbерg.
Yes, Kалтенbерg, that's a little castle west from München. And it is, we have a castle with a full commercial brewery in the castle. This is a very strange thing maybe, but in Bavaria, in all the big royal castles, we used to have breweries. And over the last 750 years, our family has been brewing in about 70 different breweries throughout Bavaria.
How many years?
750 years. The first brewery we had in 1260, and we had breweries ever since.
So your grand, who was a king,
yes,
started that brewery business as a. Why a king would do it?
Very simply, two reasons. First of all, in the old days, drinking beer was more safe than to drink water. And water was always polluted, particularly in the cities. And drinking water was dangerous. If you drink a beer, it's cooked, and with a slight level of alcohol, it has no dangerous bacteria. So drinking beer was one of the healthiest ways to survive in the old days. And on the second thing, it was also a very important commercial good, because in Bavaria particularly, the quantity of beer consumed in times when people had no cars, when you had to walk by foot, when you went by horse, people needed much more liquid. And the beer consumption at that time was something like half of the total intake on food. So it was a very important good, and therefore also for a ruling family it was important to be sure that good food was always available. And so it also had quite a big political dimension.
At that time, the landscape of Europe was certainly different.
Yes.
Many kingdoms, including your kingdom, in Bavaria, right? And then in Saxon, in other countries. What was the situation that time like?
Well, it depends a bit on what time you talk. Originally, Germany, for more than 1,000 years or 1,200 years, we had an empire. And we had an emperor who was elected by 7 different rulers. And those 7 rulers were in different parts of Germany. There was 4 rulers who were electing the emperor who were running a country, and the other 3 were 3 religious rulers. They were the bishops of Cologne, the bishop of Trier, and the bishop of Speyer, and then there was the country Bavaria, Brandenburg, Saxony, and Rhineland-Pfalz, and they were Pfalz was electing those 7 were electing the emperor of Germany. So they were actually more or less independent states. And later in the German Revolution in 1918, the royalties were disappeared, and Germany was made a centralized state, a federal state of different countries. today we have 12 countries which build the total Germany.
So that's why it's called Federation.
Yes.
German Federation. In
Yes.
1918, it's a new constitution, changed everything, stopped
Yes.
kingdoms.
Yes.
And by that time, your family, your dynasty was ruling Bavaria.
Yes. We've been ruling since 1180 onwards for 738 years continuous.
Wow, 780 years.
Today, the family is still very strongly connected with Bavaria because we still have quite a lot of influence, particularly on the cultural side. And we always used to collect art. And so we have some of the bigger art collections in Europe. And those art collections are today shown in many Bavarian museums. And therefore there is quite a strong contact with the Bavarian state. Also with many other cultural things where our family still has a strong connection. And if there's any celebration of cities of historic dimension, then normally someone from our family will be invited and participate.
How old would be your, in the art collection? I assume it's good paintings,
And we have
sculptures, probably.
paintings, sculptures, and we have paintings from the 11th century till today. and so and since we've been ruling not only Bavaria, we also had some other parts of Germany which we ruled for long times. Therefore, we had collection in those parts too, and we, in about 1800, we moved most of the collections to Munich. So today, München is one of the hubs of museums in Germany.
That's one of the reasons of your family to make Munich into the art center of Germany and Europe. And you have wonderful art galleries there.
Yes.
So still today, this castle Kалтенberg belongs to you.
Yes.
It's your property.
That's a private castle. I stay out there, and it's rather strange if you have a brewery and a restaurant, and if you feel like having a beer, you can go in the cellar and get it directly out of the production.
And now the public can go and drink beer there?
And we have a beer garden out there and a couple of restaurants, so it's...
For public?
Yes.
And you live on the top of it, or do you live there?
I live there, yes.
And many of you, how big family is now?
My family is quite big. I have 5 children, but they're currently spread out through the world, so they're not all there.
Very interesting. Your Highness is the second generations which has sort of stopped by the constitution to be a king.
Yes.
Right, second generation.
Yes.
How do you feel today? You are king actually, but it is officially not named like as a ruler, but you were born there. You 700 generations.
It's a little bit black and white. You know, you get some rather strange reactions sometimes, and when you're a small child in school, it depends. If you happen to get a very socialist teacher, he might say, okay, Prince, I'll try if I can get him down. So you'll get it the hard way. The next one will be very obedient. And so it's much more black and white. And children will try whether they can fight with you, if they're stronger or not, what happens if you do. And so you learn by that. And you learn, first of all, you learn to understand that discrimination happens everywhere. Which is good. Which is good. And so you don't try to be... it's important that you don't try to feel like being something different. I think one has to be a little bit more humiliated, and I think this is very important.
Well, of course, if you are prince and king, that should be... your children, have they gone through this, and to which degree?
I think this happens to everyone, and also I think if you are the child of a famous person, of an actor, you go through exactly the same problems. I think it's something which is just human, but it's and on the other hand, if it's very interesting if you have a history you can actually study. So if you go to a city and you find a monument and you find, oh, this was, I don't know, my great 25 generations back, that's something which is quite amazing. And then you start to think, you know, why did he do that? Or why did he make such a castle? Or why did he cause some terrible things at times? And, you know, if you read all the stories of things which happened, not all of them are very nice, some of them are rather bad. So you see, you find interesting, good things, bad things everywhere.
You feel it
but
being a part of it.
Yes.
Welcome. With your children, will they continue the business, or?
I would think so. I think first of all they do different things, but I think there will be one or two who will probably look into the business, and also I think they will be interested in the beer. Beer in Bavaria, as I said, it's something which everybody is interested in. It's fun. It's to do with parties. It's to do with restaurants. It's to do with people. And so it's something where you get very close. And if you have, in Kaltenberg we also do other things. We have a big medieval tournament. We do the biggest medieval show in Europe, and with horses, with stuntmen who hit each other off horses, and like the old tournaments hundreds of years ago. And that's a big thing in summer. And
everybody is coming from Germany,
from
Europe,
yes,
all over the world.
From all over.
And they fight with these big horses?
Yes, they come with horses and lances. We have about 100,000 people out there.
What will happen if there is a serious injury?
And we work with very professional stuntmen, so the injury level is reasonably low.
Wow.
But it happens sometimes. If you get hit with a horse with a lance, and if you make a mistake, you can hurt yourself, obviously. But that was a sport they did for a couple of 100 years, so why not now?
Speaking about the horse, how many horses do you have?
Not many at the moment. I'm still riding. When I'm at home, I try to ride every day, but we used to breed horses on a big scale. Today, horse breeding in Germany is, I think, just too expensive. We still have about maybe 10 horses at the moment, but we used to have a big horse stud farm. We moved that we had a big farm in Hungary before World War II, and so we moved some of the horses back to Hungary, and they kept breeding them there, and I just kept some at home for riding, and we do a little bit of breeding, but quite small.
In Mongolia, we are, our culture, our spirit, alive, a lot interconnected with horse, and good songs are there, and the sort of very deep connections are here. How about you?
And I always had horses at home. When I was young, my father had about 100 horses at home, 120. And I was riding, as a child, I was riding every day 3 or 4 horses, training young horses from scratch. So the horse I ride today, I took him from the field when he was 2.5, and I started riding him, and I always trained my horses myself.
So you still training horses?
Yes.
When they were very small?
I still do it. The horse I ride today, I trained it myself.
So
it's fun.
As a fitness exercise, you do also horse riding, or what else?
Fitness, horse riding, and do more for enjoyment. I think you don't need to be terribly fit. I think it's more, and I do more, in winter I do a bit of skiing, that I do quite intensive at times, and in summer I was on sport, I was doing competitive sailing.
Well, then about the sailing, it's something which we don't know in Mongolia much, but however it looks great. What makes you loving so much that sailing? You were champion of Europe, your team, right?
Yes.
And you are competing all around the world with yachting.
We've been but small boats mainly. I was sailing big boats too, but I was mainly sailing small boats, Olympic classes, and then later similar boats, which are very light, very fast.
Should be big sailing.
And a lot of sail and very little weight. So the boats are not very big, though. I have one very small boat at the moment. It's called an 18-foot skiff. If you look at the internet, you will find what it is. 18-foot skiffs. They sail a lot of them in Australia. They're extremely fast. Three people, 90 square meter sail, and the boat weighs about 150 kilos carbon.
Wow.
And the boat does top speed of 30 knots. So that's very fast.
Quite
not as fast as the America's Cup boat, but not much less.
Quite recently, Americans won back this sail. What was that about?
And that's the America's Cup. That's probably the most expensive trophy ever made. It's not, the trophy itself is not very expensive. It's a big silver cup with no bottom. And that's, I think, almost a symbol, because you can spend unlimited money which goes through that pot to try and win it. And it's normally sort of a rich man's sport of rich Americans who spend endless money to win that trophy. And this time it was won by America. I must say they did a great job. I felt very sad for New Zealand, who lost. But if you then look at the boat, it was New Zealand construction, the American boat. And on the American boat there was only one American, all the rest was Australians and English and whatever.
what water sailing boat looks like, making people feeling traveling all around the world, going free with the wind.
In a way, it's like that. In a way, it's like that. But I think and I was always interested in, you have to understand the nature, you have to understand wind, you have to understand water, you have to understand technical things, because it has a lot to do with how to make a boat fast, and on the technique, how you shape your sail, and then it's a lot of tactic, because you have and you have the chance to sail right beside your competitor, and if you do better, you have a chance to win. So it's a very demanding sport. If you go in the races, and if you just go for fun sailing, it's a very different thing. Then you can just hotboard a boat and have a comfortable time and sail over the ocean. But I was more in competitive sailing.
Okay. Back to horse racing. In Mongolia, we are national horse racing. It's once a year, along 40 kilometers long distance, etc. But in Europe, in Hong Kong, I saw the horse racing in a particular fixed place, and the people are beating on that. I was in Windsor, saw it all, how the British do. How do you do in Germany, in Bavaria?
We have the flat racing like you have in England and on.
Okay.
But we also have show jumping. We have 3D events, which is combined with jumping, dressage, and cross country with a lot of speed. So there's different ways of riding. I was more in 3D event and cross country riding. I didn't do not much dressage.
Do you participate in that horse
I did a
racing?
bit, yes.
Do you bid
not in flat racing. My wife had a license for flat racing. She did the horse races.
Wow.
But I went for 3D event where there is part of it is high speed racing, but mainly it's jumping in up and down over hills and ditches and stuff like that.
Wow.
It's fun as well.
It's a beautiful sport. The escorting, this jumping, then moving, all this. I don't know when that type of will be here as a national sport.
I wouldn't be surprised if that would become fashionable, because it's great fun, and it's something which I think you have a tradition of horses. And
yeah, these traditional horse racing.
But the distance racing is also very interesting. I think that's a great sport.
Do Germans bid for horse racing?
And yes.
And this, for example, in England, big money goes.
In Germany, not as much as in England, but it's there is quite a lot of betting.
Okay, you are bidding or you are racing?
No, I'm doing just more fun riding now.
Tell us about, please, your business are all around the world. What is the reason you keep coming? There are so many other beers, and why your beer is coming?
Very simple, because first of all, I think beer, and Bavaria is known for beer, and we do some very unusual beers, partly, particularly the Bavarian Weiss beer. And Kaltenberg Weiss beer is a product which is natural. It's not filtered. It's made with a very different yeast, so it has a very fruity flavor, not as bitter. And if you follow sports, you will see very often that the sportsmen, after football games or if you look after Bundesliga, you see they always drink Weiss beer.
Yes.
And that in Germany, this is a habit that people after sport, because it's not as bitter, it's very easy to drink. And the unfiltered beer there's yeast in it, brewer's yeast. And brewer's yeast is quite isotonic and has a lot of vitamin B. So that's why many sports people and young people drink Weiss beer in Germany. Now, shipping beer around the world is difficult, because it's not good for the beer if you ship it for thousands of miles on a railroad or on a truck, and it's shaken for days and goes through heavy temperature changes. It's much better if it's fresh. And so our concept was very simple. We, rather than sending beer around, and we look for well-built breweries, which are built with equipment equal to our equipment, and then we send our brewmasters, and we get the same specifications of raw materials, and reproduce our beer locally. And this can be done perfectly if the quality of the machinery is right. Now, when we came here in Mongolia, we found that EPU has bought a completely German-built and constructed brewery, which is absolutely perfect for that. And so all we needed to do is send our brewmasters and our hops, our yeast, our malt, and reproduce the beer as we do at home, but the beer is fresh. So it's much better than if you import.
Will you change their line specifically, or
we have to change? We have a very different profile of fermentation, because it's a very different yeast doing it, and it is also different raw materials, because on Weiss beer we work with wheat malt and no barley malt, and we work with specific Bavarian hops. But it's a recipe we had for hundreds of years. For more than 200 years in Bavaria, we were the only Weiss beer producers.
I see. That means your yeast is a particular or only made in your area. That it's hard to.
A yeast is a microorganism. It's yeast cells, and there's hundreds of different types of it, and they have different. They do different results. Some yeast will make flavors, will produce a flavor which is rather more winey, some are more fruity, some are very bland. It depends what strain you use, and it also depends at what temperature you ferment, and if it's warm fermentation or cold fermentation. And so there's a lot of know-how in there. And brewers guard the secrets of their yeast very carefully in order to keep the recipe secret. And so what we do in a cooperation like this, we disclose all our know-how and our yeast and our raw material. And if we do that on a long-term basis, we can reproduce our beer elsewhere. And we do that today in about 12 other countries. And you get the same flavor.
Compared with different countries, since you have 12 countries, you said, was it difficult to come to this market?
Like in any other country, if you find the right partner who understands the potential of having an authentic Royal Bavarian beer, then it's easy. If you go to a market where they are not looking for something like that, then it's difficult. It depends very much on the people you're speaking to, and I think I was very impressed that the people here were very fast in understanding the idea and actually executing the idea by doing it. I think it was we never before were able to achieve a perfect beer in a shorter time. From the first signing of the contract to producing the beer, it took us roughly 8 weeks, which is nothing.
Okay. Beer here and all around the world is regarded as also alcohol.
Yes.
Of course, some depending on the spirit inside, and the beer companies usually all around the world also. People would expect them more selling, but they are doing a lot for wise consumption of alcohol.
Yes,
beer.
Correct.
So what do you would tell it at this account?
I would think the most thing is that you should enjoy a beer and you shouldn't get drunk. And what we do a lot is educating people on the very interesting different flavors. And the way we drink beer in Bavaria generally is you would have a glass of beer for your lunch, or you would have a glass of beer at dinner, and you would look for enjoying and for understanding different flavors. But you wouldn't really go out and do binge drinking and drink 10 beers in the evening. That's something all you get is drunk, and then if you get drunk, you get ridiculous, and your girlfriend will run away. So it's not necessarily the best idea.
That's the
but
small
if you enjoy a small a beer for lunch, or if you enjoy a beer for dinner, this is a total different story, and then that's the culture we have at home. And maybe people see too much the big beer festivals. But even so, if you go to the big beer festivals, you rarely will see unpleasantly drunk people. And people know how to live with it and are careful. But I fully agree that people should be very careful what they drink and how much, and rather drink quality than quantity. And
exactly.
We have a tasters club. We try to educate people for beer tasting, for understanding. We have beer sommeliers trained. They go to a university course and learn how to discuss, to do the flavors.
Beer sommeliers, and
very much like in wine.
Yeah, this is really a culture that, as you said, just to know exactly where to not stop drinking, where to go ahead. Now this your brand, now in Mongolia now.
Yes.
I think first German brand produced here.
Yes.
And it will also be representing that exactly, the culture you have described.
Yes, we will work on that. And I think we are not looking for getting drunk young people. We would like to get connoisseurs enjoying a great drink and enjoying it in a way that they come and enjoy it a second time at a different occasion. And I think that's much more important than having someone who drinks 10 beers and then complains about a headache the next morning.
Do you run every day?
Not very much. I do a little bit of physical training, but not too much running. I think I do more on special movements, which I need for sailing and riding.
And a day, your average day consisting of what kind of routine?
I don't think there's too much routine.
Okay.
Because I have many different obligations, and that makes it interesting because you have quite different things. We have sometimes that you have really office days like anyone in the management, and then it would be just for sort of an office day from say 8:30 in the morning till about 7 in the evening. But that's maybe 2 or 3 days a week. But then there are other things where there's a lot of traveling, or there are some days where there's some cultural events, or some on the beer side, some festivals, some restaurant concepts to be developed and stuff like that. So it's quite varying.
And you certainly being also at different art occasions, ceremonies.
Yes, many times.
Yeah, and what do you promote that arts, like you're wonderful in Munich, in Bavaria, the arts, to other part of the world?
And we do sometimes, as many, sometimes exhibitions are going to other countries. But I also have a small subsidiary, another company, which I take care on in a very specific field in porcelain. And we have a very old porcelain manufacturing business.
What's the brand
it's
name?
Called Nymphenburg. Nymphenburg porcelain is one of the very traditional German porcelain manufacturings, and in fact today in Europe we're the last one who does everything by hand. So we do the raw material ourselves, we buy stones and mill them to dust and make porcelain with it. We do all our colors ourselves, and we paint everything freehand, nothing pre-printed. And we have no press for making plates. All the plates are turned in the old way.
Wow.
But like that you get the thinnest cups.
Yes.
Like that you also get the hardest porcelain. And it's the big art, we've got about 75 artists working there.
Wow.
And it's every piece is a unique piece. So it's catering to people who really enjoy that and who want to have art pieces which are, or also for daily use. Some people have, want to have a set of plates which is painted with things they have a connection with, maybe with their houses or with their favorite plants or with their favorite animals. We recently had an Arab ruler who wanted to have all the animals of his national park and all his plants, and we made a tea set for 20 people out with that. So it's things like that. So everything is individual because it's handmade anyways. So if someone says I want it different, then we make it different.
I don't know, the people in Germany especially buy it to present to somebody as a symbol of Bavaria.
They also do that. The drum, if the Bavarian president goes on travel, he would normally have a Nymphenburg lion with him.
I see.
And we also would have, and it's not only that, it's quite often that people will buy it not only as present, but also for table decoration. Formerly, when you were sitting on a table, it was quite difficult for people to start and to get into conversation. Wow. So conversation pieces, a crazy animal or an interesting figure, if you put it on the table, people who don't know each other have a reason to start a conversation. Yeah. And formerly they were changing the decoration on the table between different settings of food.
Okay.
So that was also quite an interesting
another good reason
table
to
culture.
Wow. In Bavaria, in that particular republic or provinces, how you call it now?
Well, we are technically we are a republic.
Republic of
Bavaria. A state of and the state was in Germany.
Yes,
and the state of Bavaria was in Germany.
And in Mongolia, they know Bavaria with BMW.
Yes.
More, and you have a connection with BMW?
Not myself. One of my cousins was for 37 years professional car racer, and he is still working with BMW. He was driving for BMW for many years.
So you are busy with this sort of businesses. Legally or constitutionally, can you run for a political position?
Technically, yes. Why not? But our family stayed out of the political side for political parties because the idea of a monarchy is not contradictory to a democracy. It is contradictory to a republic. And that means if you take the idea of a monarchy serious, then it means you have an entity which is not connected to the day-to-day party business.
Yes.
And so you have a head of state who is limited by constitutional barriers, but he's not depending on single parties. And that if you take that idea serious, then it would be a contradiction to be a member in a political party, and therefore you cannot be representing a complete state. You would be also seen left or right or middle, but you're not. You don't have the possibility as acting as a unifying factor. And if you take the idea serious, then what it means is a unifying factor can work as a long-term support for democracy. As an example, if you take Spain, in Spain, when the current king came to rule, and very few years later they tried to have a revolution in Spain, and he said, okay, no revolution. The army was backing him, and he was able to reinstall and secure democracy. And that's much more difficult if you have a politically elected president who is backed by, say, 50% of the population, and then you have the others who are against it, and it's difficult to be a president for everybody if only half have elected.
Your Highness, we have gone through very interesting history of Germany across time and across territory and across products, and it was such a great pleasure doing it with such a person like you and your family, the history of Germany, particularly Bavaria. Thank you very much for coming to this, to Mongolia, and coming to my show.
Thank you very much, and I hope we see you sometime with a nice beer as a member of our Tasters Club, and we'll educate you on beer.
Taken, and thank you very
flavor.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.